Hello everybody, welcome back to Let's Play Great Ace Attorney 2. This is Vitafuser. On last episode, we went on one last dance of deduction with Herlock Sholmes and Yujin Mikitoba. It's time for us to figure out what the hell's going on. Seshiro, why and how did you fit yourself in there? I was really hoping beyond hope not to find you here, you know. But you're not entirely unsurprised, I take it. No, quite. I just wish it were some other way. Well, are you ever going to introduce me? Your reputation precedes you, Mr. Sholmes. I've read many stories of many of your exploits. Excuse my manners, Sholmes. This is Mr. Jigoku, my old friend and traveling companion. The devil's in the details, Mikitoba. I believe you meant to say, your old friend and traveling companion, who made the cowardly decision to flee the country without a word to anyone when things turned sour. I see my reputation precedes me as well. What an honor. Well, Seshiro, are you going to explain all this? You know it all by now, I imagine. What you didn't know, of course, is that 3 days ago, on the night before our arrival in Britain, an attempt was made on my life here on this very ship. By the Reaper of the Bailey? Yes, I've since heard. Because you were once prosecuted by the Reaper, weren't you? 10 years ago now, mind you. I had no idea at the time what a dangerous individual he was. Anyway, when we arrived in London to find the symposium was postponed until goodness knows when, it became all too apparent to me that I might very well be targeted again. So you decided to flee the capital without saying a word to me about it? I am afraid so, yes. Of course, I realize now that I really ought to have confided in you. It's somewhat surprising, I must say. What is? Well, first-class cabins aboard luxury steamships are on very short supply. It's more than a little hard to believe that this one just happened to be unavailable. So says the protagonist of some colorful short stories. Well, I don't care for your opinion. That cabin did just happen to be available, so I purchased a ticket, and here I am. I've just seen for myself the obvious remnants of that incident in a cabin. So you'd already purchased your return ticket before you even docked in Dover, had you? To prevent anyone else taking this cabin and seeing the evidence. Is that it? Yujin, I have nothing to say to you. Well, in a mere 5 minutes, this ship will set off on its outward voyage and not make port again until Italy. I'm afraid we must insist you disembark with us at once. You have no jurisdiction over my movements. We have this, Seshiro. Take it. What is it? It's a subpoena from the Old Bailey. You're a man of the law. You know what ramifications of ignoring a document like this from the British courts would be. Do it or else. You can prepare then, Yujin. Come on, let's go. One moment. What is it, Sholmes? Inside Mr. Jigoku's trunk, I found this rather peculiar, fascinating trinket. That's something from a watch. What is that, Seshiro? I can't help you, I'm afraid. Some small component from something. But what? I have no idea. By the look on his face, I think he genuinely doesn't know. Well, let us pocket it as a small souvenir of our brief sojourn in France. Naruhodo, I think we've done as much as we can, I'm afraid. The rest will be on the shoulders of you and your assistant. Sogi, I know you, and I know you wouldn't lie, but still, there's no doubt. You're holding something back. You know more than you're saying. During the past 30 minutes while this court was adjourned, all possible efforts were expended. But sadly, Mr. Jigoku's whereabouts could not be ascertained. We must accept the unfortunate conclusion that the Reaper has already done the deed. There's no sense in wasting any more of the court's time. The prosecution calls for an immediate verdict. No, the trial cannot end now. You're a Japanese man, Ryunosuke. You should know when to lay down your sword. And you should know when never to presume when the battle is won. The court has already been presented with all the evidence and heard all relevant testimony. And there can only be one conclusion, that the accused is guilty. All relevant testimony? Far from it. There is still a crucial witness from whom the court has yet to hear a single word of testimony. In that case, call your witness to the stand at once, counsel. Yes, my lord, tomorrow, if possible. The witness is already on his way, and scheduled to arrive tomorrow. Who on earth is this crucial witness? Seshiro Jigoku. The very man allegedly murdered by the Reaper. Judge Jigoku! You found him! Both the investigations of every policing resource in the capital suggest that Jigoku is already dead. How in the name of God did you find... The court must hear Mr. Jigoku's testimony. No judgment should be passed out until all testimony has been considered. In that case, I hereby call the end of today's proceedings. Court will reconvene at the same hour tomorrow. No objections from either side? No, my lord. No objections, my lord. This is giving me flashbacks from when Megatron wore the judge's wig in Beast Wars. I think I might put that in my thumbnail. We live to fight another day. By the skin of our teeth. To be continued. Yeah, to be continued, alright. There we go. The unexpected halt of proceedings sent a clamor around the courtroom. But outside the Bailey, where Londoners knew nothing of the secret trial within, it was a typical still night. Then at a little past 8 o'clock that evening, Mr. Sholmes and his partner returned to Baker Street. You've returned, my dear fellows. Welcome back to Britain, and thank you for your timely help. Think nothing of it. I believe you've had an even more wearing day than Mikotoba and I know. You could say that. We were on the brink of defeat in court earlier. So this prosecutor, Asogi, had you on the ropes, did he? And he's your best friend, you say? Well, he's not really the man I knew in Japan anymore. Kazuma has changed. Oh, Mr. Naruhodo. I mean, it's incredible to think that he'd even entertain the idea of acting as the Reaper's assassin. Well, nevertheless, you must introduce me. After all, I've only met the young man as a corpse. When all this started, almost a year now, Mr. Sholmes still hasn't told us the truth about what happened back then, about the motivation for what he himself described as a great detective's lie. Now then, I must say, it's really quite a journey all the way to France. Ah, there's another country, Mr. Sholmes. So what news of Judge Jigoku? We took him to Scotland Yard. The investigation detectives there have a lot of questions for the man. Poor Professor Mikotoba. This must be quite a shock for him. Ah, yes. I picked this up at the telegraph office on our way home. What is it? Surely you haven't forgotten already. I put upon you for the matter only yesterday. You put upon me, Sholmes? I had to fill out your telegram to Japan and foot the bill as well. You had a reply already? What was so urgent, though, Mr. Sholmes? Such matters can wait until later. I'm far too hungry for an involved conversation at present. You're going? Well, that's good news. The supper's ready, everyone! And what a feast it is! If I were none the wiser, I think the trial was won already. Roast beef, kippers, stew, steak and kidney pie, Yorkshire pudding, and a frickin' turkey. Tomorrow could be a long day, so eat up. In that case, I think I'll seat myself just here. This place appears to be the only one set with a helping of pheasant as well. Oh, sorry, Hurley, not there. Why ever not? Are we in set places this evening? Yes, and that place is for Susie's daddy. For me? That's right. I made it especially for you, Professor Mickey. I see. Oh, that's terribly kind of you. It's a shame, really. What do you mean? Well, for a brief moment, I believed it. That Susie and I were half-sisters, I mean. Oh. Iris? Do you mean... Yes, I know now. I overheard yesterday. I secretly listened to the conversation you had, after I tricked you all into thinking I left. What? What? The misunderstanding arose because of that autopsy report from 10 years ago. But actually, it turned out that neither Dr. Wilson nor Professor Mikotoba are Iris's father. Yes, about that, Iris. You know I know. You can't tell me at the moment. Oh, Iris. The pheasant is by the way of an apology. I'm sorry for eavesdropping. Oh, no, that's quite alright. Why don't I get any apologetic pheasant? So just who is Iris's father? I suppose that's not something we'll be finding out today. So then, let us dine, while our largely pheasantless plates are still piping hot. A fine idea, Sholmes. It all looks absolutely delicious. Eat as much as you like. There are always seconds. This could be our last chance to ask questions before tomorrow's trial. And about that telegram from Japan and about Kazuma. Can't let this opportunity slip away. I do like this fireplace. It's one of the best things I've ever seen since we arrived in the country. I yearn for a Japanese kotatsu. Putting your legs under a warm blanket at table is comforting. Do be careful, Mr. Naruhodo. Don't mistakenly put your feet into the fire, will you? You'd suffer terrible burns, you know. I worry sometimes about how Susato sees me. The pretty tea set is out. You do overthink things at times. The blackboard. She seems to have drawn a lot of little stick figures all lined up. Look. Cheap apples at the market is what all of them say. Little figures can speak. All your questions would be answered if only you would read this month's Rants magazine. So I'm the one who can't make any sense of this. Alright, we're done with that. Let's talk to her shoulders. What are you doing? Surely it's abundantly clear that I wasn't brooding over Mikotoba's refusal to share his pheasant with me. Nevertheless, I felt the need to withdraw from the social circle for a while and look on with hungry eyes. Sorry, Hurley, but I cooked that pheasant specially for Susie's daddy. Even though I've played the role of father to you for far longer. Mr. Sholmes, could I discuss some things with you? Certainly, my dear fellow. I find myself in quite the mood for a spell of conversation. No doubt, you're hungry to learn more of my deep love of game. I can probably contain my curiosity on that one. You needn't look at me in that fashion. In what fashion? It seems that before we discuss the pheasant, we have some rather unpheasant manners to discuss. That one was horrible. So, what was in the telegram you received back from Japan then? Ah, this! I think my lucky stars had arrived in time. Record found as indicated. Duplicate follows. K. Asogi, A. Shin. T. Gregson, J. Wilson. What? Those 4 names from the last game. We've come across that exact same list before. They came up in that unforgettable case last spring. What appeared to be a simple case of aggravated murder turned out to be masking monumental intrigue. A plot that involved the sale of British governmental secrets to foreign states. In exposing the means by which those secrets were being leaked, we deciphered a fragment of a message. K. Asogi, A. Shin, T. Gregson, J. Wilson. But we didn't find the names out until the case was over, so we never did get to the bottom of what they meant. All we knew was that the information had been sent by somebody in the British government, by somebody to somebody in Japan. So, why are the names coming up again now? Yes! Where did the sender of your telegram discover them, Mr. Sholmes? I've here the message I had wired yesterday. Allow me to read it to you. Enter Judge Jigoku's office undetected and investigate the telegram records. Expect to find communication from Britain dated 1 year ago. List of 4 names. Need by tomorrow. Naruhodo. I sent it to a detective I know who specializes in clandestine missions of this nature. You asked Inspector Hozonaga to undertake such an onerous task for you. Has he taken care of that cough yet? And in my name? I wonder what guise he opted for this time. My dear fellows, it was a matter of great urgency, you understand. Anyway, the list of names was found in Seishiro's office, as Sholmes predicted. So you mean that mysterious collection of names that was sent from Britain to Japan was sent to Judge Jigoku? He was the intended recipient. I don't believe it. It's all getting connected. That doesn't answer the question of what the list of names actually signifies. I did formulate a hypothesis about that. But without a shred of evidence, I couldn't possibly have shared it. Mr. Sholmes, he looks deadly serious for once. Alright, we have that. That tragedy we had to go through on the SS Buria. It was all for nothing. Kazuma wasn't dead at all. We were completely taken in by the lie you told us. Your great detective's lie. I took no pleasure in deceiving you. However, at the time, all that concerned me was preventing the young man's study tour from taking place, whatever the cost. What? I capitalized on the events that transpired to see that he was sent back to Japan. His remains, you mean? Precisely, Miss Usato. And then, I made sure somebody else was sent to Britain in his stead. Oh my. You mean... The arrangement between our two countries was already in place. One university student lawyer and one judicial assistant to be accommodated on a study tour. In other words, by arranging for someone else to fill the place originally intended for Mr. Asogi, I would successfully prevent the man from arriving on our shores for several years at least. Do you mean to say that it was all in aid of stopping Kazuma coming to Britain? That's why you... Think back, Mr. Naruhodo. Was there not somebody who quite casually urged you on to continue the voyage to England? The terms of the study tour were negotiated by the Department of Justice in both Great Britain and Japan. In the light of Mr. Sogi's unfortunate death, I'm afraid this study tour can no longer go ahead. My dear fellows, the majority of problems have an extremely simple solution, you know. All you require is one lawyer and the study tour can continue, surely. But there's no one else with the necessary qualifications, Mr. Sholmes. We know of no other lawyer. The voyage to London still promises a good month of time. Ample opportunity, I would say, to find yourselves another suitable lawyer. So, you manipulated me. I've often remarked on the extraordinary lengths to which friendship will drive a man. I was quite sure that you would rise to the challenge for your late friend. I don't believe it. But if it was all contrived... I mean, what happened was treated by the authorities as murder. A woman was mistakenly arrested as the perpetrator. What do you suppose became of her? Naturally, I didn't allow the mass apprehension to have any serious repercussions. I subsequently explained everything and assisted the unfortunate soul in finding the foreign refuge she sought. I seem to remember Miss Susato and I had some rather strong words for her. Well, she was certainly not devoid of all guilt. She deserved every word, I'm sure. I wonder if she made it to America then. I'm afraid I simply cannot comprehend it. Why would you go to such lengths, Mr. Sholmes? Why were you so determined to keep Kazuma-sama from reaching Britain? The truth is, 12 months ago, there was already a very tangible omen of the impending tragedy, you see. Hope. An omen that, at this very moment in time, is close at hand. An omen of all these tragic events that already existed a year ago is close at hand. We need to find out exactly what Mr. Sholmes knows. We gotta present this telegram. There was no room for doubt with your instructions in this telegram, Mr. Sholmes. were very clear that it was Judge Jigoku's office that should be searched, so you obviously knew that's where the list of names would be found. K. Asogi, A. Shin, T. Gregson, J. Wilson. But we only learned of those 4 names just over 6 months ago, and only because they appeared as part of the top-secret government communications that were leaked. That's true, yes. At the time, you were unaware of the background. You see, those 4 names were wired to Japan. Around 6 months before that, approximately this time last year in fact, when you were both still in Japan. It really would be hypocrisy on my part to reprove others for intercepting state secrets. Because after all, I'm perpetually eavesdropping on communications between the British and Japanese governments. You're perpetually doing what? How? Never mind the details, but you should know. No secret is safe from Herlock Sholmes, when he has designs on knowing it. Oh my, Mr. Sholmes, what a fabulous line. Now, 1 month after that list of 4 names was wired to the recipient Jigoku in Japan, Dr. John H. Wilson was murdered by Asa Shin. As soon as I learned of the incident, a hypothesis rapidly took shape in my mind. As it turned out, I was partially correct, and partially mistaken. Nevertheless, it was the beginning of all the tragic events that were to follow. That list is a hit list with the assassin and the mark. Mr. Sholmes, please, tell us all you know. Tell us about these 4 names and the tragedy to which they're all somehow connected. As I said, when I learned of Dr. Wilson's murder in Japan, my mind immediately turned to those 4 names, because you see, there was someone else on that list who I believe to be recently deceased. What? Who? A. Shin, as it was described in Japanese script. An actual fact, Miss Asa Shin. That was a familiar name to me. She was a professional killer, well known amongst London's unsavory classes. I see. But she had completely vanished from existence several months before Wilson's murder. So I came to the logical conclusion that she had herself been killed. And accordingly, I became fearful for the lives of the remaining 2 persons on the list. K. Asogi and T. Gregson. Owing to our proximity, I decided to take measures to protect Gregson myself. But I determined it would be safest if young Asogi wished to stay away from Britain. So that's why you went to such lengths to prevent his study tour from going ahead. Exactly. So, you already knew who Kazuma-sama was, Mr. Sholmes. Oh yes, Sholmes and I have exchanged correspondence for years. I'd recounted many tales about Asogi to him in my letters, and the news of Dr. Wilson's death, of course. So, Dr. Wilson's dead then. I didn't know. Iris. I knew he wasn't my daddy, but still. That's very sad. I'm so sorry, Iris. We knew the significance of the name, obviously, but we just couldn't bring ourselves to tell you. No. But what you just told us, Mr. Sholmes, doesn't completely tie in with the facts. There's one big hole in your hypothesis. A big hole, Mr. Naruhodo? Ah, yes. You mean about Asa Shin, I presume. Of course. Exactly. She wasn't killed, was she? She was in Japan, posing as a visiting student under the assumed name of Giselle Brett. I'm glad you're keeping up, my dear fellow. But I only became aware of that fact 2 days ago, in the foyer of the Great Waterloo Hotel. And upon hearing that startling revelation, the hypothesis that I'd formed surrounding those 4 names was completely turned topsy. Topsy. What do you mean by what you're saying your hypothesis was turned topsy? I believed all 4 names on the list to be the names of victims. However, I was mistaken. Very much so. Asashin was a killer. So this telegram has a list of both victims and killers, is it? I told you. Indeed, and it would seem that Miss Shin was dispatched from Britain with the sole intention of dispatching Mr. Wilson. Her visiting student status being merely a front. Oh. Which would have... Oh. What happened? Ah. There we go. Sorry about that. Which would of course explain why no motive could be determined for her actions. Sorry about that. So the real reason Dr. Wilson was killed by Asa Shin is because he was the target of an assassination. And forearmed with that knowledge, fresh consideration of this telegram puts the list in a very different perspective. What do you mean? Well, does it not strike you? There is another amongst the 4, who subsequently became a visiting student. You mean... But of course, a name you know only too well. You mean Kazuma? Oh. He did say in court earlier today. Yes, on 31st of October I accompanied Inspector Gregson to Dunkirk in order to carry out a mission. And the mission was the assassination of a mark. Young Mr. Asogi accepted that mission a year ago now. Surely not. In conclusion, this document is a contract of sorts. An international agreement, one might say, detailing an assassin exchange. An assassin exchange? How could Kazuma possibly have gotten involved in something like that? Let's assume that we have 2 parties, each wishing to dispose of a distinct individual. Those 2 parties then make a contract to swap their respective assassination targets. That would be an assassination exchange. So to begin with, the British assassin is dispatched as a visiting student to Japan, where she kills her target. And then the Japanese assassin is dispatched as a visiting student to Britain to eliminate his target. It certainly does sound like an exchange. But what on earth is the point? Don't forget, Naruhodo, that the British assassin at least escaped conviction, thanks to diplomatic immunity afforded by consular jurisdiction. Oh yes! Such jurisdiction should be null and void under the terms of the new treaty between our new countries. So the fact that it was brought into place suggests intervention at the very highest levels. The highest levels. These murders were the 2 sides of the same coin, linked not by common motive, but by contractual agreement. As such, they appeared utterly unrelated. Yet in truth, the assassins were complicit in one single devilish scheme. That disassociation and the safeguard of diplomatic immunity were, I believe, the motivation behind this plot. But wait a minute, Sholmes. If this telegram really is describing the exchange of assassins as you're suggesting, it would mean that the Japanese killer's target was never Seshiro Jigoku at all. It would mean Asogi's target was actually Inspector Gregson. What? Kazuma was here for Gregson. Yeah, that was the target. He wasn't actually the mark. That's exactly what it would mean. I hold myself personally responsible for failing to keep the inspector safe. Mr. Sholmes, I told him of my fears and implored him to seek a transfer to an overseas position. Obviously, with the young pickpocket in tow. Yes, Gina. Come to think of it, Inspector Gregson didn't mention to us at the Great Expedition that he'd be transferring to the Paris police and taking Gina with him. But without informing me, he engaged in one last assignment, it seems. And sadly, it turned out to be his very last. This is too much to take in. Alright everyone, that's quite enough of all that serious talk for one day. I'll agree. It's time for us to put the kibosh on this vid, and we will get to things next time. See you guys then.
Have no doubt, I'm in control. You may think chasing ghosts is